Education has taught us to observe the universe. Have we ever learned to observe the observer? Warm greetings to all the leaders and educators. May I begin with a question? If education has never been more advanced, why are so many students and increasingly so many educators feeling less whole? Not because teachers care less, not because students are less capable, not because schools have stopped innovating. If anything, the opposite is true. Never before have we had such extraordinary access to knowledge. Artificial intelligence can explain almost any concept in seconds. Digital platforms have democratized information. Curricula have become more inquiry-based. Assessment has become more authentic. Educational research has expanded enormously. And yet, across continents, schools are reporting remarkably similar concerns. Student anxiety, teacher burnout, attention fragmentation, identity struggle, a growing search for meaning. These are no longer isolated observations. They are becoming shared educational realities. So perhaps the question before us is no longer, how do we teach better? Perhaps the deeper question is, what kind of human being is doing the learning? That is a conversation I invite us today. Not as advocates of a particular philosophy, not as representatives of East or West, but as educator, committed to understanding the learner more completely. For centuries, education has evolved remarkably. The industrial age required disciplined workers. The informed age required knowledgeable thinkers. Today, the AI era increasingly values creativity, adaptability, collaboration, and ethical judgment. Each era has transformed what society expects from education. Yet something fascinating has happened. As access to information has increased, certainty has not. Connection has increased, yet loneliness persists. Achievement has increased, yet many young people continue to ask, am I enough? Notice the shift. 30 years ago, students mostly asked, will I pass? Today, many ask, who am I if I don't? One is an academic question, the other is existential question. Curriculum alone cannot answer existential questions. This explains why educational challenges today cannot be solved only by adding more content. Because information addresses what students know. Existential questions arise from how students experience themselves. What the evidences are telling us. UNESCO, OECD, IB mission, neuroscience forming one circle which is called a human flourishing. As an educator, our philosophy is not merely to notice patterns. It is to examine evidence. According to UNESCO, the world faces a shortage of approximately 44 million teachers if every child is to receive quality primary and secondary education by 2030. Across many education systems, retaining experienced teachers has become an increasing challenge. OECD's Teaching and Learning International Survey similarly highlights concerns around workload, stress, and teacher well-being. Meanwhile, schools across different countries report strikingly similar student experiences. Difficulty sustaining attention, growing anxiety, perfectionism, fear of failure, increasing emotional exhaustion. These observations are remarkably consistent despite differences in language, culture, curriculum, or geography. This suggests something profound. Perhaps the challenge before education is no longer merely instructional. Perhaps it is human, and this brings us to question. When we speak about developing the whole child, what exactly do we mean? Academic growth? Certainly social development? Absolutely. Emotional well-being without question. But is there another dimension quietly influencing all the others, a dimension we rarely name, yet constantly depend upon attention, presence, and awareness? The quality of consciousness from which every act of learning emerges. Transition. Interestingly, modern neuroscience has begun asking remarkably similar questions, not about curriculum, not about examination, but about the nature of observing mind itself. And perhaps this is where one of the most fascinating conversations in education begins. So far, we have explored that what our educators are experiencing. Now, let us ask a different question. What is happening inside the learner while no one is teaching? For many years, neuroscientists believed that when the brain was at rest, it was relatively inactive. Then in 2001, neuroscientist Marcus Raichle and his colleague made a discovery that fundamentally changed this understanding. They identified what is now known as DMN, default mode network, a network of brain region that becomes active when our attention is not focused on an external task. The resting brain, it turns out, is anything but idle. It remembers, it imagines, it predicts, it evaluates. Most importantly, it continuously constructs the narrative of me. This capacity of one of the greatest gifts of human cognition, it allows reflection, planning, empathy, creativity. Yet, when left untrained, the same network can also become a source of persistent rumination, self-judgment, and anxiety. The question for education is profound. We spend years teaching students what to think. How often do we intentionally help them become aware of how the mind is thinking while it is constructing their identity? This question is not unique to neuroscience. For thousands of years, contemplative traditions across cultures have exploded through disciplined observation of human experience. In the Indian Upanishads, one of the enduring questions is, who is the knower behind knowledge? In ancient Greece, Socrates urged us, know thyself. Stoic philosophers such as Epictetus distinguished between what is within our control and what is not. In contemporary psychology, metacognition asks learners to think about their own thinking. Across cultures, different languages, different centuries, we encounter a remarkably similar invitation to become aware of the process of awareness itself. This is not religion, this is not ideology, this is a human inquiry. Modern contemplative sciences has begun examining practices such as mindful attention and reflective awareness using rigorous research method. For example, the work of Dr. Judson Brewer has shown that awareness-based practices can reduce maladaptive self-referential rumination and support more adaptive patterns of attention and emotional regulation. The important point is not that every school should adopt the same practice. The important point is this: awareness appears to be trainable. And if awareness is trainable, might it also be educable? The question resonates deeply with me as an IB educator. When we look closely at the IB, we find something remarkable. The IB has never defined education simply as academic success. Its mission is to develop young people who are knowledgeable, caring, reflective, principled, open-minded, balanced, and committed to creating a more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. The learner profile invites students to cultivate dispositions, ideal skills, develop self-management, communication, research, thinking. TOK encourages learners to examine how knowledge is constructed. EE extended essay develops sustained inquiry. CAS invites meaningful engagement with the world. These are not isolated program components. Together they point towards a deeper educational aspiration, not merely the acquisition of knowledge, but the formation of the learner. This raises a question: if reflection is central to learning, what enables reflection? If self management is essential, what supports self management? If ethical action matters, what shapes ethical awareness? Perhaps there is an underlying capacity from which all of these emerges. Not another subject, not another curriculum, but the quality of awareness with which every subject is approached. This is inquiry that gave birth to Unbroken Awareness Initiative, not as an alternative to the IB, not as replacement for existing programs, but as a non-profit educational inquiry exploring whether training awareness can strengthen the very capacity that international education already values. Our purpose is not to replace evidence with philosophy, nor philosophy with neuroscience. It is to explore where careful science, educational practice, and contemplative wisdom may illuminate one another. I would like to leave you with one final thought. Throughout history, education has continually expanded its understanding of what it means to educate a human being. We moved from memorization to understanding, from understanding to inquiry, from inquiry to critical thinking. Perhaps the next frontier is not another skill. It is the cultivation of awareness from which all skills are expressed. So before we redesign curriculum, before we introduce the next technological innovation, perhaps we should pause and ask a quieter question: who is the learner before learning begins? Because every education decision we make already contains an answer that question, whether we recognize it or not. And that leads us naturally to our next dialogue. In our next conversation, we will step into one of the oldest and perhaps most important questions in education. Before we decide how to teach, we must first ask, who exactly is the learner? Is learning simply a cognitive transaction, or it is also a transformation of human being? That is where our inquiry continues. Thank you for joining me.